Okay, well, welcome again. Thank you for joining us in this farm succession planning series, Investing in Your Farm's Future. Tonight, we're going to talk about what the elements of a farm management plan and also about the tough topic, what can be a tough topic of communication. So I'm Laurie Walensky. I'm going to start this tonight's presentations off. Just to make you aware of the collaborative effort that is going into this series. It's the University of Maryland College of Ag and Cooperative Extension, the University of Delaware Cooperative Extension, the University of Maryland Ag Law Education Initiative, and the Maryland Department of Agriculture. So this is the third Thursday night in the series, and there will be one final session next week. So if you've joined us for the previous two, thank you, and we hope that you'll also stick around for next week's session. So when thinking about farm management, what words come to mind when you think about farm management? If you could type them in the chat, that would be great. If you have anything that comes to mind when you think about farm management.
Looks like we've got soil conservation plans, land management easements.
Yes.
Creating financial plans, ag preservation.
Yeah, good, thank you. There are so many elements involved in farm management. So these are just some of the terms that I was thinking about as I was putting this together. Farm management is about decision making, being a specialist of all types, animal, equipment, crops. Environmentalist, they're stewards of the land, they're economists, they're consumers, they're owners and they're employers. They're also risk takers. I'm sure that some of these words resonate with the farmers on this webinar. They wear so many hats, but they're specialists of so many skills, and they have so many jobs. So, and when we think about a farm management plan and how it's used in a succession plan, it's a multi-component risk management document that includes a business plan, a land use plan. So some of you typed in things related to a land use plan, an estate plan, a retirement plan, and a management transfer plan. So for this portion of the talk, we're going to focus on the business plan and a management transfer plan. So many of us think of a farm as a legacy, something that we pass down to the next generation. And a farm management plan and farm succession planning is used to ensure that the legacy and succession of a farm is there. It provides a written plan and allows for the transfer of a farm the way the owner intended. And a farm management plan also provides a roadmap. In the words of Yogi Berra, you've got to be very careful if you don't know where you're going because you might not get there. So it's not just a roadmap for the current generation, it's a roadmap for many generations. And so the roadmap may have been begun years and years ago, but it's still being followed. So a farm management plan also describes or illustrates the process by recognizing the different generations that have traveled on this road. So in the past, it might have been grandpa's farm. Currently, it's mom and dad's farm. And then it will be the successor's farm. And so sometimes it helps to have pictures or descriptive words to talk about what the farm was in the past. So again, we have Grandpa's farm, where Grandpa had a dairy and row crops, particularly corn. Mom and Dad switched from dairy to poultry. And in this situation, it looks like the successor wants to add another crop of hemp. And so when this is written down, it's easier to, when things are in writing, it's easier to plan and remember what that plan is. And there's been a lot of risk transferred in all of these different plans too. So a farm management plan involves a great deal of decision making and managing risk. And as you can see, there's all kinds of risks that need to be managed. Production risk, which would include weather and new technologies. Market risk, there's the local market and the global risk. Financial risk, profit and return on investment. Legal risk, there's a lot of risk about food safety now, or just having people on your farm. And then there's the human side of risk, healthcare and succession planning. And by the way, depending on who you're talking to, sometimes succession planning is covered is considered legal risk. Sometimes it's considered succession or human risk. I think it's both. So it's a risk. It's risk though, or it's risk. It's mitigating risk. So ultimately, what farmers want to do is what any business person wants to do in their decision making. They want to mitigate risk, but they really want to maximize their return on investment and on long-term capital appreciation. And mitigating risk is it's a full-time job. But a business plan is a really good way to start with mitigating risk. So I think this cartoon was particularly relevant to this year. This year, I resolved to stay away from any unnecessary risks. Well, we're trying real hard to stay away from risks. It's a tough year. All right, so what is a farm business plan? It's happens to be a lot of separate documents, but really all those documents are done in a two-stage process. The first part is to write or create the plan. Now, yes, that's one stage, but it is a lot of documents. There's different pieces to a business plan. And then the second stage is to implement the plan. So when you're writing the plan, it's very helpful to involve others. And by others, I mean your family members, who are your adult family members who are working on the farm with you, your lender, your implement dealer, if you're thinking about you're going to need to replace equipment down the road. But you should always be honest and you should always be realistic. So try not to get ahead of yourself. And remember, this is your story and it's going to address your relevant issues. So it's a personal document, but it is a business document. And it's also used as a promotional document. You might wonder what I mean by that. You will more than likely at some point want to get a loan, and your business plan will promote your farm, your business, to a loan officer so that they can see how your business is doing on paper. You know in your head and in your heart how your business is doing, but if you're trying to explain that to a lender without documented numbers, it could be hard. So the promotional document. So when you're implementing the plan, you're going to want to include some timelines. So as you're developing it, when you timelines for implementing. So in this example, off in this chart on the right, so in 2020, Dad is growing 300 acres of corn, 100 acres of bean, and 0 hemp. But we know that the son wants to transition into hemp or adding hemp. So in 2022, they're going to take 25 acres from the corn and create 25 hemp acres. And by 2025, they want to have 50 acres of hemp, which means they'll lower the corn acres because they don't have in their plan anything about adding acreage to their farm. Okay, so this is a busy slide. It just is identifying the typical sections of a business plan. The very first part is an executive summary. And this just describes your business, talks about your mission statement, and I could do a whole session on mission statements and goals. It's a very, very important part of the executive summary. Then there's the business description. You actually describe where your farm is, what facilities it has, what buildings it has, and then also a little bit about the business history. So this farm has been in the family for 100 years. And then the operations, what operations are on your farm? Is it animals? Is it crops? Do you provide services? What type of inventory do you have? What are you doing for risk management? So that might be crop insurance. A marketing plan. That would involve you understanding how you're marketing your crops or your animals, what type of contracts you have, what type of pricing and comparative advantage you have. And then you describe the management and organization of the personnel plan, professional services, and finally a financial plan that illustrates your historical performance, talks about your asset management, do you have benchmarks, and do you have a capital request? So why in the world is a business plan so important? Well, when you have a business plan, it helps you set specific objectives. And it also lets you stick to your objectives. If you write it down, you go back and look at it, oh yeah, I was going to do 200 acres of corn. But it also allows you to share your ideas, your plans, and action items with family members and employees. So for example, if you're thinking about a major equipment purchase, you can look in your business plan, look and see how old the other equipment is. Look at your financial numbers and see if you can afford that and talk about that with other people. It helps if it's in writing. You can open up that business plan and have a conversation. It also helps in decision making. New rentals, new employees, capital purchases. And again, I mentioned on the last slide, you can share it with lenders if you're requesting a loan. Bankers like to see an organized set of documents and records. There we go. So again, still, why a business plan? It lets you know the value of your business. It helps you with a strategy for growing your business, provides a historical reference, and it includes many of the documents used to begin a succession plan. It also helps with those unplanned events or triggers, as I've heard them referred to. Triggers will often cause one to make hasty decisions. When a trigger event occurs, we're not always thinking clearly. We also tend to be reactive rather than proactive. And oftentimes you have very little time to gather documents and share ideas when trigger events happen. And a business plan can help protect the farm in these circumstances. What type of potential triggers might occur? If you could share some thoughts in the chat. triggers that might occur where a business plan could help you protect the farm.
Let's see, we've got natural disasters, death of a partner,
Yep, those are both
global pandemic,
absolutely great answers. Yes, indeed.
market crash, climate change, equipment failure.
Terrific. Yes. All kinds of great answers.
Mhm.
So things that came to mind for me were the 5 Ds: death, disability, disaster, divorce, disagreements. Marriage, that could be a trigger event. Birth of a child, financial loss, or uncertainty related with production ag. So when these triggers happen, if you have a business plan with a written focus and idea of what you're going to do, and this business plan also will include legal documents, which we'll get into next week. But triggers can be both positive and negative, but each type of trigger can impact or change the family or farm structure. And your business plan can be a documented source of support and direction when a trigger event occurs. Okay, so now we're going to move into the farm management transfer plan. Now, this is a lengthy process. It is not once and done. It takes time, it takes decision making, and more time. But it can be done, and they're done successfully all the time. It's just that it's a matter of getting it started. But when you're thinking about what a succession plan is, think about what is actually being transferred. Ownership, management, leadership, legacy. Also, sometimes being able to transfer that worry. A lifetime of work and passion, maybe the home and livelihood. You're also transferring risk. I didn't put that in here, but it's true. So we can get into what type of documents are involved in a farm transfer. There's financial documents, asset management, tax returns, business and strategic planning, family living considerations, financial record analysis, and more. And then for legal documents, contracts and leases, personal and business liability documents, transition and estate planning. And again, this is not a complete list. And then we have the human aspects. We have health, stress and well-being, interpersonal, family and business relationships, and more. And this is a tough one. So what are we doing to transfer the farm? How are we getting this down on paper? Well, there happens to be a handy checklist that we have available, and it'll be in the resources at the end. Actually, it was discussed in the very first of the series too. So the farm transition planning checklist walks you through the steps to get your transition plan going. The very, very beginning is the preliminary steps is to open the lines of communication. You want to define the objectives and goals. You want to identify a successor. So if you have 4 children, which one of those children or which of those children are going to be the successor? And then you can assess the compatibility of the objectives and goals among each other. In the very beginning, after you've started talking about it, you're going to collect and analyze information. You're going to gather the will, the deed, the tax record, the financial documents, loans and savings, of the family members. And then once those are collected, now this takes time. This is not done in a week. So it might take weeks to collect all those documents. But if you have a business plan, you're going to have a lot of them already in place. So step 2 is generate options with all of those documents that you collected. You put them out on the table and you start looking at what there is to work with. Are you going to transfer options? Are you going to gift some of it? You're going to finance some of it? And what type of business structure will it ultimately be? And the possibilities are one of the things that come out of the communication. You start talking about what it is. And then you start making preliminary decisions. And it's tough. It is tough to make these decisions. Again, a reason not to do this in a hasty manner. Take your time. And then you're going to start to write your business plan or your transition plan. So it just includes a summary, again, a business overview. And if you've got a business plan, then you can start from there. A financial plan, an action plan on how this transition is going to take place. A contingency plan in case something, there's a hiccup along the way. And then a communication plan. How are you going to make decisions? How are you going to talk to the other family members about things that need to occur on the farm? And step 5 is implement and monitor. And wouldn't it be great if at the very end of this and you're getting ready to implement it, the generation who is retiring is looking out at that picture of crystal clear blue water. Seriously, no, you really want to monitor the plan and see if it's going the way that you had intended. And the next generation needs to continue to monitor the plan as well. Once it is done, you'll more than likely feel like a huge weight has been lifted from your shoulders. Doesn't mean that you're completely removed from the farm. It just means that you've been conscientious about your farm management throughout and setting a good example for the next generation. Succession planning takes several years. So if you want to retire in 10 years and transfer the farm, today is a really good day to begin. As a leader, a manager, record keeper, planner, all sets a good example and has many of the documents needed to begin the process. The more difficult part, sometimes, not always, is the interpersonal side and that of communication. So with that, I think that's the last slide. This session is being recorded, so once the recordings are posted, you'll be able to access these resources. Ag Plan is a resource from the University of Minnesota, as is Ag Transitions. They're both free and they are secure, so you can share your plan with your lenders or your family members electronically. It's all passworded. We have the farm succession planning checklist, and then there's a really nice workbook by the University of Maryland Extension, the Farm Business Planning Workbook. All great resources, and I would encourage you to consider looking at them. So at this time, I'm happy to answer any questions. So if not, I want to tell you thank you very much. And this link that's here is going to be shared at the end of the session, but we would like you to, once the session is completely over. We would like you to go to the session, that link, and evaluate our session, please. My email address is at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Kay Megan now.
Thank you, Lori.
Sure.
Hi, everybody. As Lori just mentioned, agricultural mediation can be something that can be helpful in these sorts of situations. I'll talk about that a little bit over the course of my presentation, but the program that I run through the Department of Agriculture is in fact an agricultural mediation program. And we offer assistance to ag producers in the state of Maryland who are involved in various sorts of disputes or conflicts. We provide someone to sort of help facilitate the process of those discussions. Nothing against attorneys. Most of our mediators are attorneys, although they're not there in the meeting to be the attorney for anyone in specific. They're really just there to facilitate the conversation, but sometimes that can help people to narrow down the issues that they may need to discuss with their attorney or their accountant or whatever, and can work out some other things ahead of time before that. Let me see, I saw a couple of things come up in the chat here. Let me see here. Maria says some legal strategies for how to manage this situation will be covered in next week's session. So Rodney, who mentioned that last comment, there will be a discussion of some more specific legal strategies, more practical legal strategies for that next week as well. So what I will be talking about today is sort of piggybacking on what Lori was talking about. So now you've got your plan in place. How do you talk to your family about transition planning? That can sometimes be some of the most difficult part of the process, because for a number of reasons, one of which being we're all human beings, and as human beings we don't like to think about our own mortality. Our children don't like to think about our mortality. Our grandchildren certainly don't like to think about our mortality, and so it can be difficult to talk proactively about a time when you may not be here anymore, and what your wishes are for that, and what other people's wishes may be for that. In addition to which, traditionally, the way that things have happened is that people don't talk about transition planning. I'm going to put that in quotes because that's more of a modern sort of term. Typically, people had a will, and you might not have known what was in the will until the will was read after the person had passed away. And at that point, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about what anybody might have wanted or not wanted, other than the person who wrote the will. It was something that you found out about afterwards. So that, all of those things sort of, the taboos around talking about those issues can feed into those things, and can be a difficult conversation to have, particularly when you may have wishes that conflict with the wishes of some of the people in your family. So as Lori said, starting this conversation early is really important. Not waiting until someone is ill or someone has an accident that disables them in some way, and now things have to be, now decisions have to be made on an emergent basis. So just a little roadmap for the things we'll be talking about. When I say that I run an agricultural conflict resolution program, a lot of people aren't entirely sure what I mean by conflict, or they may have ideas about what conflict means. So I want to talk about that a little bit. We're talking about communication skills. How do you talk to people about things? Which seems like a strange thing to discuss because we talk about things all the time, but we don't always discuss how to talk or the most effective ways to talk about specific things. and then tips to make this discussion, which can be very difficult, easier. So, what is conflict? Okay, so if people can go to the chat box and throw in, when you hear the word conflict, what are things that come to mind? What things just sort of pop into your head when I say the word conflict? Now, unfortunately, because I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat, I don't think.
So money has been typed
Money.
in.
Mm-hmm.
Disagreement, anger, hurt feelings.
Disagreement, anger, hurt feelings, all of those. Yep.
Fight,
Mm-hmm.
family dynamics.
Oh, yeah.
Greed.
Absolutely. Greed. Sometimes.
Politics.
Politics. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be talking about a lot of those things. Oh, looks like some other stuff came up there.
Yep. Problem, opposite poles.
Mm-hmm. Um, uh-oh, hang on, let me readmit Rodney because somehow he seems to have managed to go outside. Okay, so one of the things that I tend to think about with the word that I tend to associate with conflict is friction. And the reason that I like the word friction is that it can mean a couple of things under different circumstances. There are some circumstances where you want friction, okay, and some circumstances where you don't. For example, if you do not change the oil in your car regularly, which reminds me I need to do that, what will happen is that you will get engine parts that will start to rub together. You get heat, you get friction, and what will eventually happen is that your engine will lock up and you will no longer have a functioning engine. So now your car, your truck, your vehicle no longer works because of the friction. Under other circumstances, for example, if you're driving on snow or ice, you want there to be friction between your tires and the road. If there is no friction, then what happens? Your tires spin, right? And you don't go anywhere. You just stay in one spot and dig yourself a deeper and deeper hole, and you don't actually move. But if there is friction, the proper type of friction between your tires and the icy or snowy road, you can go ahead and move forward. So the same thing is true for conflict. There's conflict that can keep you stuck in one spot, or that can keep you from make things completely inoperable. And then there's the kind of conflict that used properly can move you forward. It can be uncomfortable, but at least it can move you forward. So just something to share here, because I stumbled across this several years ago, and I thought that it was a really great way of showing how something can go from 0 to 60 very quickly with regard to conflict. So hopefully we can all hear this. If you can't, please let us know in the chat.
Excuse me. I know you didn't think anyone would catch you, but you just slammed your door into my car. The least you can do is say you're sorry, lady. I don't have to take that tone. It's not like I'm hurting your resale value. I'm sorry. See? Like that.
Please note the bumper sticker. Okay, so that was fun, just for a little bit of levity. But can people just throw in the chat what just happened there? Because that escalated very quickly. Any thoughts on what just happened under those circumstances right there? Poor communication. Yes, absolutely.
A simple misunderstanding.
It could have been a simple misunderstanding. You are absolutely right. And Rodney is right as well. Poor communication about what could have been a simple misunderstanding. Had because we don't actually know that the one woman knew that her door had hit, the woman in the light colored car, her name is Lois. This is actually from a show called Malcolm in the Middle, from anyone who was a child or a teenager in the 90s. Yes, emotions out of control, definitely, and no attempt to de-escalate. And they egged each other on, absolutely. So what happened here is you don't know what happened, whether the woman who opened her door knew that she had hit the other person's car. The first words out of Lois's mouth were, "I know you didn't think that I would catch you," which suggests that the woman was doing something on purpose, "but you just hit my car with your door." And then the woman came back in a defensive way and said something very snarky about basically that the car wouldn't be ruined anyway. And it just sort of went up from there. Now, this is a sitcom, and, you know, these things are blown somewhat out of proportion for humor purposes, but it's very easy for things to go like that in real life. Maybe they don't escalate to the level of people hitting each other with their cars, but your emotions can absolutely get out of control. People don't know how to de-escalate things. People can egg each other on from what was a simple misunderstanding that could have been dealt with some decent communication early on. And then you have situations. I get people all the time coming in for mediation, and they'll be talking about a conflict that's been going on with a neighbor or a family member. And I'll say, well, how long has this been going on? And they'll say, oh, let me see. They moved in next door in 2015, so about 5 years. Have you tried to talk to them about, oh, no, because he's crazy. So I don't try to talk to him. But I want to try to mediate this now. So sometimes there are things that could have been dealt with earlier and more easily. And the same thing is true with family members. I mean, family members know you best of anybody in the world and know how to push your buttons. So don't think that just because they're your family, they're easier to talk to. Okay, so just a quick thing here about conflict styles. There are different types of styles of conflict that people tend to have. Some people tend to accommodate, so they give in. Where do you want to have dinner? I don't know. Where do you want to have dinner? Well, I was thinking maybe steak. Oh, no, I had steak for lunch. Okay, well, then we'll go wherever you want to go. That they just accommodate. They give in. Avoid. A lot of people avoid conflict. They don't like it. It makes them feel uncomfortable. It makes them feel anxious. So they just walk away from it as much as possible. Compete. People who bang heads, right? Somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. People who compromise, you give in a little bit, I give in a little bit, and we'll meet somewhere in the middle. What I will say is that often enough with compromise situations, nobody's actually really happy with those, because everybody gave up something. Or collaborate. This is the sort of thing that Lori was talking about that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to work out something that works for everybody. But that is, in fact, something that is possible. It just takes a really, really long time. So depending on what the situation is, different types of conflict styles may be appropriate. For example, with those two ladies with their cars, they did not know each other. They are not family members. They are not friends. They were probably never going to see each other again. Had Lois just looked and seen that there wasn't really any damage and said, no big deal, I'm just going to leave, none of that would have happened. So, under what circumstances are these things important? So, if you notice here, there is an axis along the side here that says the importance of the relationship with the person that you've got the dispute with. And then down here is the importance of the outcome of the dispute. So let's say that it's somebody that you have a relationship with, that you want to try to keep that relationship. The importance of the relationship is high. The importance of the outcome is not that important. Then you might accommodate. It's okay if I lose this time, I can win again later down the line. It's not that important where we have dinner. It's more important that I not get into an argument with my significant other about where we're going to have dinner, so I will accommodate. If the importance of the relationship is low, like the two ladies in the parking lot, and the importance of the outcome is also low, which it was, but they didn't see it that way, then you might just avoid it. Everybody loses. I lose, you lose. We break even. If the importance of the relationship is high and the importance of the outcome is high, then maybe you compromise. We both win, we both lose. However, if the importance of the relationship is low and the importance of the outcome is high, for example, political arguments on the internet. You don't know these people. You don't even know their real names. But the issues that you're arguing about are things that are very emotionally important to you. Then you compete. Somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. And then here in the middle, we have collaborating. This is what we do in mediation, which is we work together to come up with solutions that are mutually beneficial for everybody. Okay, so moving ahead. So what makes family discussions so vulnerable to conflict in the first place? Well, to begin with, there are unspoken expectations. Like, well, of course James will take over the farm. Every oldest son has since my great-grandfather. That's just sort of how that goes. That's the tradition, and that's how that happens. Well, it's possible that James doesn't want the farm. You may not have ever had this discussion with James because the assumption has always been James is the oldest son, therefore he will take over the farm. So that can be an issue. Unresolved family baggage. Somebody had said family dynamics earlier. One of the things that will tend to come out in this sort of a discussion is unresolved family dynamics. Things that you may not have thought about since you were small children, but they always come out. Mom always liked you better. Sibling rivalries, divorces, estrangements of varying. I myself have a brother that I have not seen in person since I was 16 years old, and I am 48. We interact on Facebook, but I have not seen him in person since I was 16. So that can be an issue that can impact these sorts of discussions if there's somebody who's no longer within the the main family circle, but whose wishes need to be considered in these sorts of situations. Any questions thus far? Okay. Other things that can make family discussions vulnerable to conflict. Somebody had mentioned politics earlier, values disagreements. People can have very different ideas about what's most important to us. So in some families, there can be a discussion or a dispute around whether it's more important to keep the farm in the family and keep the farm intact, or whether it's more important for the family to have ongoing financial stability. So those two things may be mutually exclusive, or they may not be. You just may not have found the best way to get both of those things at once. Tradition versus innovation, gender roles, for example. I pulled the picture in this slide from an article in one of the agricultural journals. All of the people in this picture here, all women, and a lot of them are women of color, and increasingly, this is the face of agriculture in America. This is not what people tend to think of when they think of farmers in America. But increasingly, these are the larger numbers of folks that are coming up. And so it may be that in the situation that we were talking about before with, well, I want James to take over the farm, James may not be interested in taking over the farm, but his sister may be. And it's not something that crossed anybody's mind because of their thoughts about traditional gender roles. Okay, so how do we communicate around some of these difficult issues? Focus on soft issues first. I know that Lori just spent a lot of time talking about how to do the planning aspect of things. And that's absolutely important. Getting that information down and getting your plans in place is extremely important. However, sometimes starting off your discussion with family members on those concrete, practical issues can be really overwhelming to people, because they're like, wait, what is all of this legalese? I don't understand this. And wait, why are we talking about this in the first place? Is daddy gonna die? Does somebody have cancer? So sometimes it's good to introduce the subject. Dad and I have been talking about what we'd like to have happen with the farm after us, and we'd like to hear your ideas. And then you can have the opportunity then to clarify family members' feelings and values about the farm and the family and the transition. Getting some of those soft issues out of the way ahead of time and letting people talk about their feelings around those things will help for people to be ready when it comes time to talk about the more concrete, practical issues. If they're too busy thinking about, well, why are we talking about this? And oh my gosh, this makes me so sad. And I don't want anybody else to live on this farm. This is our farm. Can get completely in the way of being able to talk about the planning aspects of things and the plans that you may have in place already. So just a quick thing here, feelings versus values. So feelings are emotions. So anger, feeling left out, feeling jealous, feeling excited, feeling scared, nervous, relieved. Those are all feelings. Values are the things that the feelings tend to come from. So your values are what you consider to be important. So independence, for example, reliability, self-determination, sticking together, integrity, success, being admired, cooperation. Those are all values. And often our feelings come from our values being violated in some sort of way, particularly our more upset and angry feelings. So for an example here, I can't even believe, so disbelief, anger, those are feelings, that you're thinking about leaving the farm to James because he's never been a person that you can count on when things get rough. Reliability, that's a value. being able to tell the difference between those things, because often people will be expressing themselves in an angry way, or they're expressing various sorts of emotions, but those emotions are coming from something a little bit deeper, and knowing where those emotions are coming from can be important, rather than saying, don't you talk to your father that way, which is what tends to come out often enough. Okay, an important skill in communication has nothing to do with actually talking. It has to do with listening. And the funny thing is that often enough, we are not taught to listen in our culture. If we are listening, often enough what we're doing is pausing while somebody else talks, waiting for them to breathe so that we can talk. That's not the same as listening actively. So what active listening means is acknowledging the feelings that people may be having, repeating back statements that they may have said to make sure that you understand them, that you're clear on what it is that they're saying, asking open-ended questions. Does everybody know the difference between an open-ended question and a closed-ended question? What I just did right there, by the way, that was a closed-ended question. If it can only be answered by a yes or a no, it's a closed-ended question. An open-ended question is might be something along the lines of, can people tell me what they know about open-ended questions? Or, oh, actually, that was a closed-ended question. Tell me what you know about open-ended questions is an open-ended question. So that it gives people the opportunity to ask more about things. Identify what it is that the person wants. Respond with empathy when appropriate. If somebody says something that's really nasty or really unacceptable, don't empathize with it. You can empathize with where it's coming from, but you don't have to empathize with what it is that's actually coming out of their mouths. And then sometimes you can clarify with more neutral, less confrontational language. Let's see, I thought I saw something come up in the... Lori, is there something in the chat that I'm missing?
There's a comment that says semi-structured.
Yes, exactly. Open-ended, yes. So what are some blocks to active listening? Things that get in the way of your being able to listen actively. Defensiveness. We all get defensive if we feel like we're being attacked, right? Bias from your own opinions, beliefs, or experiences. We all think that we all have been through various types of experiences. We all have our own beliefs. We all have our own opinions. And it's easier to fall back on our own opinions and our own beliefs and our own experiences than to try to understand other people's. And it's something that we're doing in an insidious way or that we're doing to be mean. It's just something that we do as humans. It makes sense that if your experience is a certain way, that you assume that that is the experience that other people have had, and it may not be. Another block to active listening, ordering somebody to do something. You will do this because I said so. Judging. You know what's wrong with you is this. This has always been your problem. What happens? Shuts the person right down, right? Threatening. You will do this way or else. Never a help in these sorts of discussions. Diagnosing. This is a big one because, now everybody reads things on the internet and, I have always thought that you have attention deficit disorder and that it was just never diagnosed. And that's your issue. You just can't pay attention to anything for any length of time. And that's your problem right there. I like our little otter down here with his hands over his ears, la, 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 not listening. That's often what happens in situations where we're uncomfortable, is we don't want to listen. And we have to sort of fight against that and fight against these blocks in order to have these conversations in a way that's helpful and useful to everybody. Okay. Reflective listening. Reflective listening is sort of a step above active listening. Active listening is more passive. You're just listening. Reflective listening involves two steps: trying to understand the speaker's idea and offering the idea back to the speaker to make sure that you've understood correctly. So just like a mirror, right? Mirrors don't judge. We might think they do, but they don't. Mirrors don't judge. Mirrors don't interpret. Mirrors just reflect. You put something in a mirror and the mirror reflects it right back at you, right? So you're not trying to interpret what the person's saying. You're not trying to judge it. You're not trying to weigh it. You're not trying to come up with another way of saying it. You're just reflecting it back to give the person the opportunity to hear what it is that you heard them say, and for them to clarify, yes, that's what I meant, or no, that isn't what I meant. Let me try to clarify it further. So, and that takes a lot of practice, folks. There's a reason why mediators take 40 hours to get approved to be a mediator, and then we have to keep going to continuing education ongoing. But I'm just sort of giving you some ideas on ways to deal with this as you talk to your families. So, some tips to make this discussion a little easier. It's never going to be like real easy, but easier. As Lori said, start the process early. It's really easy to put these things off. It's not something that seems urgent until somebody's ill or there's an emergency. So start by setting goals for years in the future. Ask yourself these sorts of questions. When do you want to retire? Do you want to retire? How much money do you need to retire? And how much money does the farm need to keep running? Do you want to stay involved in decision making, or do you want to transfer all the responsibility to somebody else? So thinking about these things proactively can be really important and will impact the way that you plan on doing the transfer. Are there people in the family who are interested in continuing to run the farm? Let me ask that again. Are there people in the family who are interested in continuing to run the farm? If this is not something that you know the answer to, it's something that you need to find out the answer to. And if they are interested, do they have the skills to take over? What often happens, and this is not a bad thing, is that a lot of farmers do not retire the way that a lot of people in other professions retire. I have often heard people say that they intend to continue to work the farm until they drop dead in the field. And that's fine, as long as when you do drop dead in the field, there is somebody who knows where the books are kept, who knows what equipment is leased and what equipment is owned, who knows what mortgages there are on the land, who knows what gets planted when, what gets harvested when, who to call to service the irrigation equipment. All of that information needs to be available to whoever's going to come behind you. And so that's something that needs to be considered. How do you take care of non-farming family members? Somebody had asked a question about it being very difficult when you have a farm that's split up between 3 or 4 siblings, and they now want to try to split it up among their children, which splits it up even further. It's possible that that not all of those people will be involved actively in running the farm. So how do you take care of non-farming family members? Or do you take care of non-farming family members? Some people decide that the people that they will leave the actual farm business to are the specific people who perhaps have been helping to run it ongoing, and that there will be some other financial settlement made on people who are not actively involved in running the business. Sometimes equal is not fair. I wasn't involved in doing this mediation, but having set up a mediation where there were 9 siblings and each of them had been left a 1/9 share of the farm, and there was now a huge disagreement about what they wanted to do. Trying to get 9 people together who live all over the country and try to get a decision made can be very difficult. Number 2, involve family in the planning early and often. This should not be something that you are doing entirely by yourself. If for no other reason than because it's a complicated process, and also because people need to be aware of what's in place and what isn't in place. One possible suggestion, this does not have to be how the way that you do it, but it's one suggestion, is to hold regular family business meetings. Do not hold them at Thanksgiving dinner or Easter dinner and thinking, well, you know, these people are already in the house then, and then we can have the family meeting then. I would suggest not doing it that way. Family holidays can be fraught enough as they are. Throwing a business meeting on top of that is only going to make things worse. So decide who should attend and how, whether they need to attend in person or whether they can attend remotely. We've gotten very comfortable attending remote meetings now with Zoom. Rotate who runs the meeting, develop an actual agenda. This is not a time to hang out and chit chat and talk about who's having a baby next or anything like that. You can catch up and socialize after the meeting, but begin and end the meetings on time and actually take notes and make sure that everybody has them afterwards so that everybody is on the same page as to what was discussed. Involve outside advisors as needed. We talked about attorneys, we talked about accountants, bankers, insurance agents, financial planners, investment advisors, realtors, especially those that specialize in agricultural land. You may not want to sell the land, but knowing what it would be worth if you did sell it can be important in the planning process. You can get referrals from trusted friends or business associates. I wouldn't recommend just looking online or does anybody use the Yellow Pages anymore? But you may have to go through several people before you find somebody that actually you feel comfortable with. So don't see that as a failure. Finding the right people to really facilitate this process can be important. And Lori alluded to this. Farm transfer plans are living documents. It is not one and done. So develop a farm transfer plan with the family, think about it, be sure about it, go over it. It may need further discussion down the line, and that's okay. And review the plan at least once a year to make sure that it still fits in with your family situation. Children are born, people die, people get married, people get divorced. There are changes that are in place. There may be a reverse mortgage on the house now that there wasn't before. The land is still one way, but maybe there's a reverse mortgage on the house that needs to be accounted for. So these are things that need to be revisited. You do not want to be, I was telling Paul and some other folks before this meeting, that we had a situation in my family where we found a will that left two of the children to an elder sibling, and all of these people were well over 40 at this point, and it just hadn't been updated. Okay, so moving forward. Okay, so if for some reason, we moved forward there. If for some reason you try to have this discussion and you feel like you need assistance, I will say that having a mediator available to you can be helpful. They are not there to make the decisions for you. They are not there to listen to the sides and make a decision. They are really just there to facilitate the process. And sometimes having somebody who doesn't have any skin in the game involved in facilitating the discussion can be really helpful. If you're not even sure whether this is a situation that might benefit from mediation, this is my contact information. The slides will be in the public documents folder. And so you'll be able to see that then, but that's all of my contact information. You can just get in contact with me and ask. This is a situation that I've got going on. Do you think this would be helpful under these circumstances? And if it's not something that might be able to be mediated, I can certainly refer you to what sort of services might be useful to you. Okay? Does anybody have any questions, any comments, anything that I can clarify for you? I went through a lot of stuff very quickly.